In this video, I'm going to show you guys another way to hack your Sega Genesis mini consoles using the Hakchi CE 3.7 release version. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. So the first thing that I'm going to show you guys how to do is, if you've already installed Project Lunar, you are going to need to completely uninstall it from your Sega Genesis mini console. So I'm just going to show you guys really quickly how to do it. You need to make sure that your Genesis console is on and plugged into your computer, and you need to open up Project Lunar. When you're on your main Project Lunar screen where you've got the option to install/uninstall or go directly into the game manager, what you need to do is you need to hold the shift key down and press the install/uninstall. What that's going to then do is it's going to grab the original backup that's on your computer when you first installed Project Lunar, so you're essentially going to factory reset your console back to stock. Now it's going to give you a warning on screen. You can go ahead and proceed with this, and it's going to take about 5 to 10 minutes for this entire process to happen. And all the information will be displayed on screen so you can see exactly what is happening to your Sega Genesis Mini. I do want to mention that towards the end of the installation, if you do get an error that says it was unable to complete, that's totally okay. What you're going to want to do is cancel the process. It's going to say, are you sure you want to do that? You can hit yes, and then you just need to power cycle the console and then plug it in and turn it on and make sure everything's good. You should end up right back on your language selection screen with your console fully restored back into stock. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at Hakchi CE 3.7 and see what it all has to offer. So we've got Bluetooth support with the HMod installable from the modules window. We've got Sega support, obviously, that's going to be good, so full stock UI integration. We've actually got folder support, and we've also got the ability to force a specific UI theme. We've got support for launching Genesis, Megadrive games in the stock emulator, and we've also got support for launching games in other emulators. So this is going to be good for individuals who installed Project Lunar and were disappointed with games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles not playing with the audio. You can actually now set it to run with one of the cores on RetroArch, and you should get full compatibility that way. We've got save compression, safe compatibility with RetroArch and M2 Engage emulators. We've got spine generator with templates from the WES 1981, and I've taken a look at a bunch of the stuff that he's got. He's got some pretty cool artwork, so that's awesome. And then of course we also have Sega Genesis and Megadrive folder artwork by him as well. The software is going to make use of additional space on the NAND that previously wasn't usable. They've added an SD card format to the tools menu, the ability to export and import folder structure, options to create save folders on USB export, support for other gamepads in stock UI emulator. We've got RetroArch core information from the HMod files, and then we have a few other features that aren't specifically important to the end user. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to download this, and we're going to save it right to our desktop. So we just got to go ahead and download the Hakchi 2-CE-3.7.0 release.zip file. I'm going to go ahead and save that right to my desktop, and it shouldn't take very long at all. Perfect, it is now downloaded. We don't need our web browser anymore, and I'm just going to pull it over from my other monitor. As with any of our other zip files, we need to extract it to its own folder. That's going to happen. It should only take about a second or so. Here is that folder, and it is complete. So now we're going to double click and we're going to open it, and there it is. And when we go ahead and take a look inside of this folder, we're going to see that we have the Hackchi application. We're going to go ahead and launch that application. So we can go ahead and close that folder, and what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and take a look at the console, and it's restoring the original games. Perfect, so now that we've got it up and running, it says hello there, I'm very glad that you're using Hakchi 2. It's a very simple to use, just click the add more games, select some ROMs, press synchronize to upload your game, and it's actually a really simple process. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and hit OK. The first thing that we're going to see is that the Windows security alert comes up. We need to allow access in order for Hakchi to be able to run properly, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Next, they're also putting on a reminder that if you are trying to hack your console for the first time, the included USB cable will not work. It does not have data lines, so you can't transfer information. to and from the console from your computer, you're going to need a different USB cable. Now you can use the USB cable that came with the PlayStation Classic or NES or SNES Classic, or you can just use a standard cell phone charging cable. Whatever you've got laying around, you need to make sure that it has data lines in it. Most USB cables that you have laying around probably have data lines, so just try a different one that you have at home. We're going to go ahead and hit OK, and as you can see, we are currently offline, and the reason for that is because we have not installed the custom kernel to the console, so there isn't a way for it to communicate. What we're going to do is we're going to go to kernel, and we're going to go ahead and hit install/repair. And it's going to say, do you want to flash the custom kernel? We want to say yes. And what it's going to want us to do is we need to get the console in FEL mode. If you're familiar with how we did Project Lunar, you're going to be doing the same thing. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we don't have the power cord connected into our Sega Genesis Classic console. And then we're going to turn the on switch on with the power cord out. We're going to hold the reset button, and then we are going to put the power cord back in. And after about, I would say 3 to 5 seconds, we're going to get our power light flash at us, and it's going to automatically start uploading the kernel. So that has indicated we have entered FEL mode and everything's good. So this process is going to take about 5 or so minutes. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward until it's complete. So now that the custom kernel has completely installed, you now have an indication that you are done and you can upload games to your mini console now. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And there's a few things that I wanted to talk about. So right out the gate, what you're going to see is you're going to have all the different games on here. There's 80 some odd games on here, and that's going to include all the different regions. So as you can see, you've got the US region, and then if you scroll up, you've got the Japan region, and then we've got the EU region, and even some French games in there. So what I actually recommend doing is we want to get rid of these from the UI. We don't want to see them right now in this list because it'll just make things complicated when we're adding additional games. So we're going to go to the view, we're going to go to original games, and we're just going to have them hidden. And what that's going to do is it's going to remove them from this little category. They'll still be on the console, but we don't have to look at them right now when we are structuring our build. Now, in order to add games into the console, it's really simple. You can hit the add more games, or you can simply drag and drop. Now, if you do this method before anything else, what you're going to end up doing is having those games default play on the stock emulator, the M2 Engage emulator that's built into the console. Now, that's totally fine for most games, but there are some games that have some incompatibility with that emulator, for example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm going to show you guys how to add a few games this way, and then I'm also going to show you guys how to add games using the other emulators as well as different console games onto your Genesis Classic. So we'll hit the add more games button, then we're just going to navigate to my ROMs folder, and then I'm just going to go ahead and grab a few games. We've got Real Monsters, Adventures of Batman and Robin, and let's go ahead and pick Clay Fighter. We're going to hit open. It's going to process those games and it's going to throw them on. Now you can have different formats. You can use .bin, you can also use .zip. So once those games are on there, that's fantastic. What we're going to do is select all of them. We're going to right click and we're going to download box art for selected games. So it's going to go ahead and do that right from Google. It's going to pre-scrape everything and you should be good to go right after it's done. Perfect. So now what we can do is we can click on that title and we can look at the artwork that it's previously selected. Now, as you can see, it defaulted to choose the Megadrive artwork. So if you're in North America and you don't want that artwork, you can actually browse yourself. So if you select the Google button, it'll pull up all the Google images and you can choose the one that you like better. So if you want Genesis, you can double click on Genesis and that's what you're gonna get. In terms of the spine art, it's actually pretty unique. What you're gonna get is access to their logo. So you're gonna select the logo and then you actually get to choose the spine art in which you prefer. So in this case, I'm gonna choose the Genesis US red stripe to match the artwork that we selected. We're gonna hit OK, and now you can see that's gonna be our spine artwork, and this is gonna be our front cover artwork, so that's really cool there too. That would be the biggest hiccup with selecting all the games at once and just scraping the artwork. You're not 100% sure which artwork you're going to get. If you're not too picky about the artwork, you can go ahead and mass scrape everything and you can move on that way, but I would definitely recommend doing things manually. The next thing that we want to do is we want to add RetroArch and RetroArch cores to our build to allow us to use different emulators and different consoles on our mini system. So what we need to do is go to our modules, and we need to go to the KMFD mods hub. Now, KMFD Manic is the one who's put together the core set for this specific build for RetroArch, and he's done a fantastic job. He typically spends a ton of time optimizing things and making sure that they run really well. So what you are going to be getting is a good, high quality core set from this guy. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. It's going to load the repository. And then as you can see, you've got KMFD BIOS, you've got KMFD cheats, cores, RetroArch. Before we get any cores, we need to go ahead and install the RetroArch console itself. So you can choose if you want to use either Ozone or XMB. I personally prefer the Ozone build, so that's what I'm going to select. I'm going to go ahead and download that module. It shouldn't take very long. That's done. Now we can go over to the KMFD cores, and we can select whatever console cores we want. So in terms of Sega, if we scroll on down, we're going to have a few options. We've got the Pico Drive core, and we've got Genesis Plus GX core. The Genesis Plus GX core allows for Megadrive, whereas if you want to play 32X games, those have to run through Pico Drive. Now I'm going to go ahead and install both of them. You just click on them and then hit download module. Additionally, I'm going to throw on here some Super Nintendo, assuming I can find it. There it is. And I'm just going to use the SNEX 2018 core. We're going to download that. And just to finish us off, we are also going to throw on a Game Boy Advanced core as well. So now we've downloaded the cores we need, we still have to install them. So that's the next step. What we got to do is go to the X button right here. We're going to go back to our modules function, and we're going to install extra modules. It's going to pull up a dialog that says, here's all the things that you want to install. What do you want to choose? In terms of this, we can go ahead and hit the RetroArch software, and then we also want to select all of our cores. And then we can take a look to see if there's anything else in terms of things that we want to add. There is an overclock hack that you can install, but the developers have said that there are some risks with installing it. You'll have to do that on your own. It's very simple. It's from the module section. You just have to select it, install it, and then move along. But once we've selected everything we want to install, we simply just have to hit the OK button. Now it's going to go ahead and load everything up into our console. That's going to take a minute or so, and again, I'm just going to fast forward through this process. So now that that's complete, we can go ahead and hit OK. And the next thing that I'm going to show you guys how to do is to swap out which emulator you are using for your games. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to add a game. We're going to scroll on down and we're going to choose Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because we know that it has compatibility issues with the stock emulator. So here it is, the Hyperstone Heist. We're going to double click on that. It's going to process and load it up right into the software. We're going to click on it. We'll scrape our artwork. So in this case, we're just going to go ahead and select that in terms of our spine art. We're going to grab our logo. We're going to use this spine art, I think, and we're going to hit OK. And then we're going to go back to the info. So as you can see, everything is good. We've got all the information that we needed. But as you can see on the command line, it'll actually tell you what the core you're using or what the emulator is. So here it says M2 Engage. We don't want to use the M2 Engage emulator for this game. So what we need to do is right click on the game. We need to select the emulation core. And then we're going to see that our game populates here. We're going to click on it, and then we have some options over here. So as you can see, we've got the console that we can choose, and then we've also got the assigned core. So what we want to do in this case, I'm going to select Genesis Plus GX. We're going to hit apply. And what that's going to do is it's going to reconfigure the game so it knows which core to use by default in order to get this game running properly. We're going to hit close. And now if we click on that game, you're going to see over here, it's got KM_Genesis_Plus_GX. So we know that game is going to run specifically on the Genesis Plus GX core. So that's really cool too. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the view. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're going to start adding in some different consoles here. And if we don't, they're just going to get lumped in alphabetically, which is kind of annoying. So we want to sort the games by their console. And as you can see here, it automatically added a header, Sega-Megadrive-Genesis. What we need to do now is add some additional games, and we had added the Super Nintendo core, so we need to go back to our Super Nintendo folder. and I'm just going to randomly grab a game over here. We'll say Castlevania Dracula X. That's going to get loaded up, and as you can see, it's going to be in the new apps section. We're going to go ahead and look for some artwork for this game. We're going to go ahead and grab that. And then in terms of the spine art, there's not really a lot that we can choose here, so we're just going to select this. We're just going to use the custom black grid one, and we're going to hit OK. So this isn't ideal. Obviously, what you're going to want to look for in this case is a vertical artwork, but we can worry about finding that sort of thing later because it can always be adjusted. Next, we need to go over to our game. We're going to right click and select the emulation core. So we're going to select this. We have to assign its console, so in this case it needs to be the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and then we're going to run it on the SNEX 9X 2018 core. We're going to hit apply, and then we are going to hit close. So now you can see that it's changed from unassigned to Nintendo-Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So you would do that with any additional games that you want to throw on here. Now I'm going to throw a few more on here just for the sake of this video, but I'm just going to fast forward through that. Alright, so now that we've added a few games on here, I've got Nintendo Game Boy Advanced, I've got a couple games for Super Nintendo, and I've got my Genesis games as well. What we can do is from here, we want to create our folders. And the reason we want to do that is because you can only have so many items on each page that is visible. And the general rule of thumb is that you want to have no more than about 100 either titles or folders within a specific page. Otherwise, you end up having some really bad slowdowns and some major lag happen. So what we need to do is go to our structure. We're going to go to custom use folder manager, and it says click again to open. So we're going to click on it once, and we need to click on it a second time. And as you can see now, we have our home folder, which is going to have all of our games. So you have a bunch of different options. You can either split equally, you can split by first letter, and you can split by console. And what this does is it automatically creates a folder structure for you for the build. What I was originally planning to do was just a split by console. So if I hit split by console, as you can see, you're going to have a Game Boy Advanced folder, you're going to have a Super Nintendo folder, and you're going to have a Genesis folder. Or what you could do is you could create a new folder. And when you create a new folder, you can actually go ahead and rename it, and you can call it whatever you would like to call it. In this case, I don't actually need the new folder. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And then in terms of the other folders, if you select one of the other folders, for example, the Game Boy Advance folder, you can actually change the artwork. So in this case, we want to select Game Boy Advance, so I need to look for a Game Boy Advanced system folder. We can hit OK, and it'll automatically be there. So this is the artwork from the WES 1981. So it's all preloaded, you just have to select it. I'm going to do the same with the Super Nintendo. We're going to click on it, we just have to scroll down and find Super Nintendo right over here. We're going to hit OK, and then in terms of our Genesis games, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to click on it, we're going to select Genesis, we're going to hit OK, and we're good to go. Now if you wanted to add 32X games, you could do that here. So now we're going to go ahead and hit OK. We've got our folder structure created, we've got everything that we want in terms of our games loaded up. All that's left for us to do is to synchronize the selected games with the Mini. So we actually have a couple of different options to synchronize or export our information. So we can either export it to a USB drive, which is really handy if you are looking to load up a ton of different games and emulators on here. Now I don't really recommend going outside of the 16 or 8-bit generation games, and the reason for that is because the Sega Genesis Mini isn't super powerful. You're not going to get really good performance out of N64. You're not going to get good performance at all for things like PSP or anything really advanced. Dreamcast is probably off the table as well. You're going to want to be dealing with the earlier, easier to emulate types of consoles. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're not going to export to USB, we're just going to synchronize directly to the console itself. We're going to hit this button, it's going to ask us, are we ready to go? We're going to hit OK, and it's going to go ahead and calculate how much free space you have, and it's going to send it over to the console. As you can see, it did it really quickly. We're going to hit OK, and that's pretty much it, we're done. So now we can go ahead and close this, and we're going to go ahead and switch over to our Genesis Mini and see exactly how this all looks. Okay, so now that we've made the switch over, as you guys can see, we now have our folders, and it's actually really cool with the artwork. It looks really well done, and it fits really nicely with the theme. So we've got our Game Boy Advanced, Super Nintendo, and we have our Sega Genesis games. Now I'm going to jump into the Genesis games first, and the reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to show you that there isn't the stock games on here. We've gone ahead and we've hidden those as we did earlier in the tutorial, and they're going to stay hidden unless we make them visible again. So that's something that you can choose to do or you can choose not to do. Either way, it's a personal preference thing. There's been people asking how to get rid of the games altogether. That is the way that you do it. So the other thing I'm going to show you as well is within the folders, you're thinking, okay, so we've got our games here and we've got a back option, but let's say you fill up this folder with 50, 75 different games. You're probably not going to want to scroll all the way down to the bottom to try to find the back button. So right from your controller, you can hit the C button and it'll take you back one directory. The cool thing about this is that you can essentially create an unlimited number of folders. You just don't want more than 100 items within each folder. And additional folders count as an item. So if you create a new folder and you put 10 folders in there, let's say you're going to organize things alphabetically and you put A, B, C, D, whatever it happens to be, each one of those folders counts as an item within that folder, and that has to be deducted from your 100 total number of items available within that area. So just keep that in mind when you guys are putting your builds together. If we jump over to the Super Nintendo section and we hit A, you're going to see the two games that we've loaded up in here. Now obviously, if you're going to be using the stock Genesis controllers that came with your console, it's not going to be that convenient because, as you know, Super Nintendo and a bunch of the other consoles have more than just a 3-button layout. I'm currently using the 8-button Retrobit controller, and that's actually pretty handy because I have a start button, I've got a mode button which I can use as my select, and then I have 6 buttons on the gamepad and then an L and R button, so I can play most games that I want with this controller, and I will leave links in the description below to get this controller. It is well worth it. It works right out of the gate both on a stock Genesis as well as any of the modded software that we use, so it's definitely something that I do recommend and it's well worth the investment. But what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and pull up one of these games. So we'll load up Super Mario World and we're going to hit A on it. So there we go. We're going to go ahead and hit A. We're going to choose the one-player game and we're going to go ahead and get this thing loaded up. So we're jumping into our first game, and as you can see, we do have our controls. Everything seems to be working properly, but I do want to mention that if you press the start button, you're not actually going to be able to do anything in terms of pausing the game or anything like that. We have to map our start and our mode buttons to be start and select. So what we need to do is to enter the RetroArch options, we need to press the physical reset button on the console. That's going to pull up the quick menu, and from here is where we can go ahead and configure all of our buttons and our controls. So now that we've gotten into our quick menu, what we want to do is we actually want to go back and we want to go to our settings section. So once we're in our settings sections, we can go down to input and we can select A. So the first thing that we want to go down and select is our menu toggle gamepad combo. So you can filter through whatever you want. In my case, I have a mode button and I have a start button. But if you're using the original Genesis controller, you're probably going to want to switch over to something like hold start for 2 seconds. In my case, I'm going to leave the start and select options there. Then I'm going to go ahead and go down and I'm going to remap the binds for user 1. So I'm going to hit A and I'm going to go ahead and make those changes now. And now that we've got all our buttons mapped, we're going to go ahead and go back and load up our game again. And as you can see, here's our game playing properly, and I've got my start function, which is working now. And if I hit start and select at the same time, I'm going to go back into my quick menu. So that's pretty good. Everything's running properly the way we want it to. And we can go ahead and quit out of RetroArch. So we can go over to our main menu and we can quit RetroArch. That's going to kick us right on back to our main screen. And we're good that way. So the other thing that I did want to show you guys is that obviously the games that are going to be running with the stock emulator, for example, I'll load up Batman and Robin for just a quick second. We're going to have everything running through the M2 Engage emulator, and when we hit either the mode button or we hold the start button for 2 seconds, we're going to get access to our system menu. And everything is exactly the same as it should be with any of these stock games. So we're going to go back to our main menu. But this is where it's going to work for games that were incompatible with that stock emulator. So as you guys remember, we've got our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, which didn't work with the stock emulator. The game was playable, but there was absolutely no audio. If we go ahead and select this game, and we just jumped into some game footage here so that way you guys can see right away that the audio is working and that the game is absolutely playable. And then of course, because we are in RetroArch, we're either going to need to hold our start button for 2 seconds, or we're going to need to hit our start select, which is what my combination is, and then we're going to go ahead and exit. So we're going to press the B button, we're going to scroll down, we're going to exit RetroArch, and it's going to take us back into our main screen. The other really cool little feature that they've included is, let's say you loaded up a bunch of these Genesis games to be run with the stock emulator, you still have the ability to access RetroArch from any of these games without having to change any of the settings. And all you need to do is press start and hold start when you're selecting the game. And as you can see, we loaded up into M2 Engage, but then it switched over to RetroArch, and I can show you that just by entering our quick access menu, and you can see we are now running this game within RetroArch right from the main screen. So that's really cool. It gives you the opportunity to switch between using the RetroArch cores or using the stock emulator core for your Genesis titles. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you so very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think of the Hackchi mod for your Genesis Classic. If you prefer this or Project Lunar, let me know down below. If there's any features that you guys would like to see or any sort of options that you guys want to see and you're not sure how to get set up, let me know and I will try to make some additional content for you guys. But thanks again for watching. I appreciate it very much, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.